Motion passed. Order from order.
All right, let's, both sides ready to proceed, you know, with the right crying out other than that.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Let's bring out Mr. Joshua Turner, please.
And Your Honor, for the record, my client's name is Cameron Joshua. On the charge, one of the charges is reversed. I'm not sure.
I see, so Cameron Joshua.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. All right, both sides ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
It's ready.
All right, Ms. Gibson, ready? The court calls numbers 1739192, 1796046, 1796093. Sarah Chase versus Cameron Joshua. Say it again, proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this point, I'd ask the court to take judicial notice of the clerk's file on cause numbers 1739192, 1796046, and 1796093.
Thank you. The court will take judicial notice of those cause numbers that are before the court.
The judge, you would call Officer Vincent Del Dracolo to the scene.
Okay.
Judge, this witness has not been sworn in.
All right, thank you. Privilege to raise your right hand, please. Do solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth and all the God.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You can just slide in this and hold the microphone down as close as you can. Loud and clear. Thank you so much. Yes. There you go. All right. All right, so you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Will you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Officer Vincent Del Dracolo. I'm assigned to HPD Scanning Division as well as Task Force Officer with the ATM Crime Gun Strike Force. Crime Gun Strike Force.
On November, yes, ma'am. Will you spell your last name for the record, please?
Yes. It's D as in David, E as in Edward, L as in Lincoln, B as in Lloyd, R as in Robert, O as in Ocean, C as in Charles, C as in Chuckles, O as in Ocean, L as in Lincoln, O as in Ocean.
On November 22nd of 2022 of this year, were you assigned, do you have the same assignment?
Yes, sir.
Were you asked to assist in the investigation of a fugitive named Cameron Joshua?
Yes, sir.
Now, I want to direct your attention to that day. What did you do that day to attempt to locate Cameron Joshua?
My team and I conducted active surveillance in the lower Detroit area and around the 1250 William Street.
Is that in Harris County, Texas?
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Cameron Joshua have an arrest warrant issued?
Yes, sir.
What was that arrest warrant for?
It was a pocket warrant for felon possession of a firearm.
Mayor, at this point, I'd offer State Exhibit number 1 into evidence, which is a file stamped copy of the arrest warrant for Cameron Joshua. Now I'm continuing to opposing counsel.
Okay.
No objections.
Thank you. State Exhibit number 1 will be admitted.
So you told us you went to that apartment complex. What did you do once you got there?
I met with management who requested me. I anonymous and showed management a mugshot of Cameron Joshua and asked if he was a resident or was going to stay in this house.
Did you observe Mr. Cameron Joshua at the apartment complex?
Yes, sir.
Tell us about how that came to be.
We believe him to reside in building 1. We saw an individual that matched his description walking down from the stairway and enter a charcoal Cadillac XTS, which is a Cadillac sedan.
Was anyone else with Mr. Joshua?
No, sir.
Do you see Mr. Cameron Joshua in the courtroom?
Yes, I do.
And at this moment, let's all remove our masks for identification purposes. All of us in the courtroom, please remove your mask at this time. Thank you. For purposes of identification.
Will you identify Mr. Cameron Joshua by what he's wearing and where he's sitting in the courtroom?
Sitting over there, braids down to his shoulders, orange cheek.
So you say over there, where
Sitting at that desk right there.
Right, may the record reflect that he's identified.
Thank you. The record will reflect you. Please put your mask back on. Thank you.
Once you saw the defendant enter that Cadillac, what did you see next?
He proceeded to leave the apartment complex in that Cadillac. And I was taking in the going west down on lines at, I believe, the 2100 block, where I knew he had an active warrant for his arrest. I instructed TPS warrant troopers to initiate traffic stops to take him into custody for that warrant.
After you instructed the DPS to take him into custody, describe to us the events that happened.
The GPS marched units conducted what we call a felony traffic stop. He complied with verbal instructions from the troopers. He was taken into custody without incident, where we then processed the scene.
Was his car stopped in the moving lanes of traffic?
Yes.
Was his car stopped in the moving lanes of traffic?
Yes, it was.
What did y'all do, or how did y'all handle that with this vehicle in the roadway?
One of our task force officers with gloves on moved that vehicle to a parking lot to basically leave the car out of the line of traffic to prevent obstructing for traffic.
Were there any other occupants of the vehicle other than Mr. Cameron Joshua?
No, sir.
Once the car was moved and the scene was moved, what did you do next?
I began what's called an inventory search after the arrest today.
Did you locate anything as a result of that search?
Yes, underneath the dark scene, I located a black semi-automatic Glock 43 firearm.
Where that Glock 43 firearm located?
Yes, sir.
Describe to us how many rounds were in the firearm, in the magazine, and the actual firearm.
So when I cleared the weapon, I loaded the magazine due to evidentiary purposes. I did not count the rounds in the actual magazine. However, there was a round chambered inside that weapon.
Did it appear, based on your training and experience, to be a functional firearm?
Yes, sir, it did.
What did you do after locating that firearm in Mr. Joshua's car?
I cleared the weapon, put it into what we call an evidence bag, and I personally tagged it into the HRB property.
Your Honor, at this point, I'd offer State Exhibit number 5, which are certified copies of court records from the Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, the people of the State of California versus Cameron Isaiah Joshua, and the evidence I'm tendering to the opposing counsel.
Your Honor, while I don't object to its authenticity, we object that this appears to be a docket entry sheet of some sort. We object to the hearsay it contains.
Counsel, say.
Your Honor, these are essentially the court minutes that are reflected here. They are a public record. And then I would argue that they're not hearsay because they are the court records here that were taken during this case.
All right. 6 is anything to counsel. No objection of the rule 6 is confined to the
Officer Belbracolo was the defendant charged as a result of you discovering that firearm?
Yes, sir.
What was he charged with?
Felon possession of firearm.
Affidavits, Your Honor.
counsel.
Officer Belbracolo, how long have you been with the Houston Police Department?
Approximately 10 years, sir.
And I take it that as part of your process of becoming a police officer, obviously went to the police academy, correct?
Yes, sir.
You learned how to obviously conduct investigations, correct?
Yes, sir.
And also how to enter all your information in an investigation into the computer system, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how to create offense reports, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you did create an offense report in this case, did you not?
Yes, sir.
In creating that offense report, I take it nobody gave you a time limit. You had the opportunity to put whatever information you needed into it, right?
I don't have guardrail orders in front of us, but it's recommended that it's completed by the end of your shift. But yes, it was done as expedited as possible.
Certainly. In conducting that, you created an offense report in this case that accurately reflects the events that transpired. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir. The only correction made later on was the VIN number to the vehicle.
Understood. Now, on this incident, you were assigned to a task force that was tasked with executing an arrest warrant. Is that right?
On that day, yes, sir.
You've done that on many occasions, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in doing so, you had at your disposal a number of police units. Is that right?
I would say so, yes, sir.
Now, Mr. Joshua, he was a person of particular interest, wasn't he?
Yes, sir.
Because he was wanted in no small part because folks wanted to talk to him, right?
He was subject to witness warrant under investigation, yes, sir.
Sure, he was a potential witness in another investigation, correct? And so you had at your disposal other units, in particular DPS troops, correct?
On that day at that time, yes, sir.
You had about 4 different units, is that right?
To my recollection, yes, I believe so.
So you had information about where Cameron Joshua might be located, might be residing, right? And you found him at that location, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
In other words, you found him where your information thought he'd be, right?
Yes, sir.
And you set up surveillance on him, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the warrant that you had for him, why that was going to be for a weapons case, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Now, of course, that raises your level of attention, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Because officer safety is an important component, right?
Of course.
So on this day that you executed this warrant, you kept close eyes on Cameron Joshua, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And when he came out of this house, went down to this car, you didn't see him with any gun, did you?
No, sir.
You didn't see anything on his person that made you think he had a gun, did you?
Not from where I was sitting, no, sir.
Sure, and by that I mean you looked at what he might be carrying, correct?
Correct.
You looked at the outline of his clothes to see whether or not he might have had a weapon on him, correct?
Correct.
And despite that surveillance, you didn't see any weapon, did you?
No, sir.
Now, he went straight to a vehicle, didn't he?
Correct.
And that vehicle was a 2017 Cadillac sedan, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, that vehicle isn't registered to Mr. Joshua, is it?
To my recollection, the registration return did not reflect Mr. Joshua.
Was that a registration that you ran that day?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is it safe to say that on that day when you ran that registration didn't come back to you?
Correct.
All right. Did you recognize the name of who it came back to?
To my recollection, he did not recognize the name at all.
Okay, fair enough. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is it didn't come back to Cameron Joshua or a family member of Cameron Joshua's to your knowledge.
To my knowledge, the only reason why we believe that a vehicle could be possibly owned is based on surveillance photos from the end of that investigation.
Fair enough. So then you go and you see Cameron Joshua get in this car. Is that right? No one else got in the car with him. Is that right?
That's right, sir.
You recognize the person getting into that car to be the person you wanted to arrest, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you mentioned that the car went to, I think you said the 2100 block Alliance. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
But in reality, he was only driving for a minute or so, wasn't he?
To my recollection, of approximately under 5 minutes, I would say.
Certainly. So in a matter of minutes, let's say,
Yes.
Cameron Joshua is stopped by the multiple units of the Department of Public Safety, correct?
Correct.
Now, again, this is a man that you're arresting for a weapons offense, correct?
Correct.
And so, did you keep eyes on him while he was driving?
I personally, from the time he left, my chief retail was on local surveillance. So yes, we did have eyes, some form of law enforcement capacity had eyes on Josh.
And did you, when he was stopped, you described a felony arrest, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, a felony arrest means everybody's got weapons out and pointed, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
And so when that car was pulled over, there were multiple police officers had weapons on that car, right?
Yes, sir.
Cameron Joshua was entirely cooperative, wasn't he?
Yes, sir.
When he got out of the car, he didn't have any weapons in his hands, did he?
I did not observe it.
And at no time did any officer observe Cameron Joshua make any type of furtive or secret movement to put a weapon under his seat.
I did not observe myself any further movements, and I did not receive any information.
And to close that loop, you didn't put any such information in your offense report either, did you?
No, sir.
Now, Cameron Joshua got out of that car, and you indicated that you were the person who did the inventory search. That was it. And the weapon that you found was not visible to the naked eye, was it?
No, sir. It was basically I had to look underneath the seat, yes, sir.
I apologize. That was inartfully worded. To a person standing outside the car looking at the seat, it wasn't like it was tucked between the seat and the center console, right?
It was not in plain view, that's what you're.
It was not in plain view. The handle wasn't visible underneath the seat. You had to get down and look for it, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you recovered that weapon. That's the weapon you tagged in, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, sir, you mentioned, or there's been some discussion about the California Penal Code. You aware whether or not possession, the offense for which Mr. Cameron Joshua, well, let me strike it. When Cameron Joshua was arrested, he was arrested on a warrant that was obtained by an officer other than you. Is that fair to say?
That's right.
I have just a minute, Your Honor. Pass the witness, Your Honor.
No
question.
You are, thank you.
Your Honor, at this point in time, the state would offer State Exhibit number 2, which is a motion for bond conditions in cause number 1739192, State's Exhibit number 3, which is a certified copy of an order for pretrial supervision in bond conditions, in cause number 1739192, and State's Exhibit number 4, which is indictment paperwork for cause number 1739192. These are all certified copies. Your Honor, and I'm continuing to close the top four.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. Statute exhibit number 2, 3, and 4 will all be admitted.
Now, at this point, the state is rest.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the defense would offer into evidence defendant's exhibit number 1 and defendant's exhibit number 2. These are copies of the California Penal Code 2021 California Penal Code larceny sections 487 and 489. These are copies of the Penal Code. We ask for to take additional notice of those provisions.
Okay.
No objection, Your Honor.
Defense exhibit 1 and 2 will all be admitted.
And Your Honor, on that evidence, the defense in this hearing will rest.
Thank you. Right, state, let's proceed on closing argument.
Your Honor, I would reserve my time for
Your Honor, the state has offered up as proof in this case evidence of the circumstantial act of possession of a firearm. They've offered up that Cameron Joshua was arrested on a warrant. However, what demonstrated is strictly circumstantial possession. By that I mean, there's absolutely no affirmative link between Cameron Joshua and the gun found in the vehicle. They failed to articulate any control over the weapon, any actual knowledge of the weapon, any possession of the car, any link to the car. In other words, Cameron Joshua could very conceivably have simply gotten into somebody else's car with a gun underneath the seat. They haven't demonstrated any furtive movement, any attempt to conceal the weapon, any possession of the weapon beforehand. Under the law of affirmative links, Judge, this is tenuous at best. The crime of carrying a weapon requires that the person actually exercise care, custody, control, and management over the object. While they've demonstrated that he exercised control over the car, they've wholly failed to demonstrate any knowledge on his part that the weapon was there. As such, Judge, we'd argue that the evidence is insufficient to justify holding them at no bond. There is going to be some argument, I anticipate, about this issue involving California. The state has offered into evidence in support of this charge in California what appears to be a recitation of a docket sheet. I had a chance to look at it last night, and I've had a chance to look at the California Penal Code. It is unclear to me whether or not Cameron Joshua has been charged with a felony or a misdemeanor in California. What I see in the docket sheet is that he has been punished with 180 days in the county jail, probated for 2 years. In one section of the docket sheet, it references California Penal Code section 487A, which says that it can apparently be punished as a felony or as a misdemeanor. It is an offense of grand larceny. I've talked to several California lawyers trying to wrap my mind around it, but the reality is that this document that they're introducing in support of the problem in California does not definitively state that it's a felony. The reason that's significant, Judge, to my understanding, is the warrant he was arrested on was for felon in possession of a firearm. Yet we don't have any supporting documents to demonstrate that it was actually a felony that he was on probation for out of California, which would serve as a predicate offense for this offense. I would submit, Your Honor, that if in fact he was not a felon at the time of the possession of this case, his act of carrying the weapon is not necessarily a violation of the law, although it may be a violation of the condition that the court imposed as part of his prior probation or his prior release on bond for the felony offense of possessing a fake ID. Given the circumstances, we would submit that there are more than sufficient conditions that the court can impose that can satisfy the court's concern about public safety, and that the court should consider granting Mr. Joshua a bond and imposing conditions such as home confinement or a curfew or an electronic monitor to justify any concerns this court might have about safety. But given the circumstances the state has offered up, we'd submit it's woefully insufficient to justify holding him and denying him his liberty, interest, and bail.
Thank you so much,
Yes, sir. As I'm sure the court's aware, the burden of proof for purposes of this hearing is the preponderance of the evidence standard. You heard from Officer Del Bracolo that he observed the defendant in that vehicle. He was the sole occupant, the driver of the vehicle. Therefore, he had the keys to that vehicle. He stated that he observed the defendant with that car previous to that as well. That establishes that he had possession, or that was his car. You heard Officer Del Bracolo tell us that he found that firearm underneath the driver's seat where the defendant was located, and there was no one else in that vehicle. Furthermore, regarding the defendant's California felony conviction, the court goes through State's Exhibit number 5, which is the docket entry from the defendant's California case, you will see that California codes that grant theft as a felony. There's the letters FEL for felony in those court records. Additionally, this court ordered the defendant, under his bond conditions, not to possess any firearm for the purposes of keeping our community safe. The defendant clearly violated this court's condition that day when Officer Del Bracolo arrested him on his warrant for possessing a firearm and found him with another firearm. So, Your Honor, I would ask the court to hold the defendant, revoke his bond, and hold it at no bond under 11B of the Texas Constitution in cause number 1739192, and set sufficient bonds in cause numbers 1796046 and 1796093. Thank you.
Thank you. It's going to recess until the
I'm sorry.
It's going to recess until the court has a ruling. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Dr. Clark. All right, good, Mr. Joshua, Mr. Council, we want to please stand. All right, we are back on the record, the state of Texas versus Cameron Johnson. Because I'm going to go ahead and give your conditions, sir. Do not pick up any new law violations, no drugs, no alcohol, random urinalysis. Do not leave outside of Harris County. And I notice I'm not saying in particular county, I am stating it's only located in Harris County, unless you get an order and get a court permission. In addition to that, the court will also be placing you with GPS monitoring device 24/7 house arrest. If you have employment or you're attending school, provide your attorney with a letter on letterhead saying the date and time that you will be working or going to school. And the court will review that and make a determination whether or not that can be approved. As it relates to cause number 1796093, the felony possession of weapon, that you allegedly picked up while you were on bond. Of course, I set that bond at $200,000. In cause number 1796046, the unlawfully carrying weapon, previous felony conviction that you allegedly picked up while you were on bond. Of course, I set that bond at $300,000. As it relates to cause number 1739192, the case that you were on bond, this court gave you conditions. One of those being not to pick up any new law violations, also not to have possession of firearms. The court is going to set that in zero bond. Is there anything else on the side?
No. Nothing at this time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.